It is possible to become free from debt, financial worry, your boss, and your zip code. You can start living a life you love, but first, you need to find your freedom. Using financial independence and lifestyle design principles, you can create the life of your dreams now. There are many paths to freedom, and that is what this podcast is all about. My name is Becky from 20free.co, and I am the host of the Find Your Freedom podcast. After overcoming poverty, divorce, and single motherhood, Jackie Cummings Koski still reached FIRE, financial independence, retire early, in her 40s, making less than six figures. She retired from her corporate job on December 6, 2019, decades before others told her she could, to follow her dream of creating a financially literate society. In 2015, her commitment to educating and empowering Americans in the area of personal finance earned the attention of our nation's policymakers. She was officially recognized with a congressional commendation for her accomplishments and excellent work in the field of financial literacy from the U.S. House of Representatives. Jackie is a certified educator in personal finance and author of the book Money Letters to My Daughter, which was the 2013 winner of an Excellence in Financial Literacy Education Award for the Adults Book of the Year, Money Management. In this interview, Jackie talks to me about how she overcame poverty to retire in her 40s. We discuss why Jackie waited 2 years after reaching FI to retire early, how to get past the taboo and talk about money, how to teach others, including your kids, about finance, and how to use early retirement to create a lasting legacy. Welcome to Find Your Freedom, Jackie.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here with you, Becky. Thanks so much for having me.
So first, I want to talk about your background. Can you tell me a little bit about how your personal experiences have shaped your perspectives on money and life?
Yeah, I grew up in rural South Carolina. I was raised by a single dad with six kids. Now, I don't know how he did it even to this day, but he did. One of the main things that I remember is just that, we were very poor and we just didn't have access to a lot of things. Like it was paycheck to paycheck. We had food on the table, but, we knew Thursday was payday because that day the refrigerator was empty and it was grocery day. So it was really tough growing up like that. And I just remember in my mind thinking, I don't want to live like this or still be in poverty when I grow up, when I'm an adult, and when I have kids. So my dad, he was an amazing man. And growing up, I didn't realize how unusual it was for a man to raise six kids by himself. But he did. He was very, very strong. But when I was a senior in high school, he got cancer. And it seemed like it progressed very quickly. But I really only learned recently that he had been told that he had cancer a long time ago. And he just didn't get it treated. He almost ignored it for a long time until it was to its worst and he had to have chemo treatments and things like that. So it seemed like it was quick to me because I only knew about it about 3 months before he passed away. So he passed away in March of that year, and I graduated from high school in May of that year. So he never made it to my graduation. That was something that really shaped my life and my thoughts around how I wanted to grow up. I wanted to make sure that I kept his work ethic because he worked his butt off and he had, we call it side hustles now. He always worked two jobs to make ends meet. And like I said, I don't even know how he did it. So when I went off to college, it was a bit of a different experience than what I hear from my friends or other people in the fire community, because when he was gone, I was left on my own to take care of school. And even if he would have lived, he wouldn't have been able to pay for college. I had to pay my own way through school. And for me, what that looked like was I got a little bit of grant money, a little bit of scholarship money, but the bulk of it was I had to work full time. And a lot of times it was two jobs. So I was putting in like 50 plus hours a week. And I was taking a full load at school. Like I was taking 3 to 4 classes because that's what everybody else did. So I figured if I go to school, I need to take 3 or 4 classes and I needed to work to be able to pay for my school. So my grades like suffered tremendously because there's just no way that you can be working 50 hours a week and taking a full load at school. I was never happy with how I did in college, but I was just happy that I graduated. I don't know like what the lowest GPA was to graduate, but that was mine. So I was just happy because that was the first like tangible thing I could do to push me in the right direction and sort of improve my economic situation. So I remember my first job out of college was at Walmart headquarters in Bentonville, Arkansas. And I was proud of that, but it was the first time I'd moved away from home. And I had to do that all by myself. I didn't have the support of parents or family that said, oh, let me drive you there or let's get you moved in. Even when I moved off to college, there was no, let's help you move in or here's the money to get started. I'm completely alone here and I'm doing it all by myself. And so when I finally graduated, I moved to Bentonville, Arkansas to start my first job. I barely had enough money to put a down payment on my utilities and first and last month's rent. I had just barely got through school financially. And I think at the end, I got out a little bit of student loan money, but the way that I was brought up was just to work for what you have. So turns out that was actually probably not a bad move that I worked my way through college versus getting a ton of student loans because I don't know how further back I would have been if I would have taken out a bunch of student loans. But I did have a little bit that I believe that it was manageable. And so once I moved to Arkansas, I ended up getting married. I had my daughter. We moved to Ohio. And I would say I think I was married for about 11 years. And I ended up getting a divorce. And I would say during that time or shortly thereafter was what really woke me up as far as money and personal finance and knowing that I had to take this journey on my own as a single Black mom, doing it all myself pretty much. So that's when I kind of vowed to myself and decided, okay, I need to start learning about some of this and I need to do better. I had to take a deep breath. And I think it was almost 2 years after I got divorced where I finally had this epiphany that I need to really pull it together financially. And I ran so far in the opposite direction of how I grew up that I think that was my big motivator.
When you were starting to have this realization that you wanted to get your stuff together financially, was there a particular catalyst for that decision, or did you come to that slowly over time? You said it was about 2 years after you got divorced. And about what age were you at this point?
Okay, so at this point, I'm like 36 to 38. So I'm thinking I'm getting a really late start here. And the divorce itself and knowing what would follow was that turning point for me. But in particular, when we were going through the divorce, basically you look at all of your retirement accounts to be able to figure out how you need to split up those accounts. So for me, at the time, I think I was like 36, I had about $20,000 in my 401k. Now, my husband and I were making about the same salaries and we had about the same company match. I think it was like up to 6%. Okay. So there was no big disparity in what we were making or what our employers were providing. So I looked at mine again, it was $20,000 and thought I was doing a great job, right? My husband, his 401k had $120,000 in it. So there was this $100,000 disparity in our retirement accounts. And I never really found out why. There's a bunch of different factors. Obviously, he was probably putting a lot more in there. He was getting more taken out of his paycheck. Maybe he was in different investments. But I felt so ignorant and I never wanted to be and feel that way again. There was no reason I should not have known that. One, we should have been sitting down and looking at that stuff together. But two, what was he doing so different and why wasn't I? So that was probably the single thing that really, really stayed in my head, as in, I never want to feel that financially ignorant again.
And how did becoming a single mother affect how you approached finances for yourself and for your family?
Well, I wouldn't say that I overdid it, but I always tried to go really hard to make sure she had what she needed. And I had gone to college and I'd done the right things, going in the right direction. I didn't want my divorce to put me in a regressive state where it pushed me back. So I worked really hard to save, first an emergency fund. Then I started looking at my 401k. I joined this investment club because I wanted to learn about investing. So I did have this insatiable curiosity about personal finance that I discovered. And I knew that that would help me sort of get my strength back as far as making sure that me and my daughter are okay financially. That was my big thing. So I stayed with the same employer for a long time because it was secure, it was safe, I had a regular paycheck, and I had that security. So those were some of the things that were the priority. Like for instance, at work, I was in sales and I worked at our headquarters. Now, if I would have taken a field job and been a salesperson in the field and traveled, I would have probably gotten paid almost twice as much as what I was making. And I opted not to do that because I've got my daughter. I need to take care of her. And that was just my priority. So I wanted the security. I wanted to be at home. And she was the number one thing I had to make sure was taken care of. So those were kind of the things that were going through my head to as a single mom to make sure that everything would be okay.
And how did you pass on the things that you learned about personal finance to your daughter?
Yeah, by the time she became a teenager, she wasn't listening to anything I was saying. But I think kids pick up on what we do even more than what we say. So ever since she was a little girl, I would teach her to save part of her allowance and spend part of it. We would roll up coins and I would physically take her to the bank with me and I would physically show her the statements. I really wanted her to get involved. Now, as she got older and as I got wiser with my finances, of course, the first thing I wanted to do was pass on what I learned to her. That was very important. I was always a writer, like in college, journalism was a big thing for me. I always loved writing, enjoyed writing. So since she wasn't listening to me, I figured the best way to sort of memorialize all of this information and to pass all this knowledge down, I put it in a book. And this book was a very personal endeavor. The name of the book is Money Letters to My Daughter. And I really wanted to try and somehow put it in a format that she would actually read it. Like if it was a regular chapter book and boring, no, she would never pick it up. So I just wrote these little letters that got right to the point, shared what I learned. I did a lot of research for this book as well because I wanted to make sure I was a good steward of the information I was passing on to my daughter and try to take as many feelings out of it as I could first. I mean, the feelings would come out, here and there at the end. So I put this book together and that was my gift to her for her high school graduation. I started writing it when she was 14 and I would have her reading through some of the letters as I was writing the book. And when I say it was a personal endeavor, it was really a personal endeavor. She was really the only person in my life that knew I was writing this book. And so I would have her reading the letters and I would say, does this make sense? So at this time, she's 14, 15, 16 years old. So if she can't understand the letter, then the book doesn't serve its purpose. So she would read through the letters. And honestly, by the time the book was published, she probably had read every letter that was in there. So when she was in high school, I had several schools reach out to me. And of course, I also went to the schools that I grew up in and I wanted to share this information. I created a presentation and everything. But one of the biggest honors that I got was that when her school invited me to come speak about personal finance and talk about the book. So it was just so great, to have her in her class, listen to her mom talk about money. So not only was I educating her, I was educating all of her classmates. And I guess I just quickly realized that a lot of this information wasn't in there in sort of a light way that even young people could understand. That was so critical to me because, personal finance is the same basic, 10 things to, so it's all about the approach and how you deliver the message. And are you making it engaging and fun and light and in a way that a young person could easily understand? So that was mainly how I taught her the things that I taught her about money, but also she grew up in this household. And now that she's 24 years old, I'm amazed at the things that she caught on to and the things that she is living now. I'm like so proud. When we're together, I barely have to say anything because she's telling me all these things that I'm like, oh, I remember I did that at the house. I'm so glad she picked it up. So
Well, I what I love about this book that you created for your daughter, but now it's helping other young people, is making money talk accessible to young people is very important before they start making those financial mistakes. But even as adults, I would say that 50% or more of the personal finance books I've read as a money coach, as someone who works in personal finance, are not accessible to the people who are reading them. It's really high level and jargony and things that feel like going back to school, which I don't think a lot of people really would want to do, to be schooled on something, but it's something that's so integral to our lives that we have to learn it. So that's a really great format, I think, in terms of letters, from a mother to a daughter, teaching the ways that you would pass down the knowledge that you got for yourself. But it's also making talking about money not taboo, right? I've heard you talk about this before, and I'd love for you to talk about it again. But what ways do you think that we can talk to our peers and our families and our children about money to make it less of something that we stay silent about and we all wonder and we're not sure, instead of working collaboratively together to lift everybody up and have better personal finances as a whole?
yeah, unfortunately, that has been a big dark cloud over a lot of us. We didn't grow up talking about money. Like you said, it's taboo to talk about. And I think about the dynamics between me and my daughter, and it's very open, and we talk about money all the time. Like when she found the Acorns app, she was so excited about it. I had tried to teach her about investing for a long time, and what got her excited was something very simple, this Acorns app. So what I decided to do, even though I have other brokers and stuff like that, she had like a code and she says, Mom, you should get it. So of course I use her code, I get it. And we're like going through this journey together of our investment. So she's saving money and she will send me screenshots of like, oh, now my account's worth $1,200. Now it's worth $1,800. Now it's worth $2,200. So, and then I'll send her screenshots of mine because it was just really a nice little account for me to have that I just considered an account that I could cash out, anytime I wanted to. But to take the journey with my daughter to learn about it is great. So I guess to try to help lift that heaviness of talking about money is that sometimes we back off because we're not very good at it or we don't do very good with our finances. And it becomes a very negative thing to talk about. So find something positive, something good is going to come out of it. Like the reason why the whole acorns thing between me and my daughter is so much fun because it's a positive thing, right? But if it was something like debt and I'm drowning in debt, nobody wants to talk about that. So start with something positive that maybe you can do together or talk about an article. Like you don't even have to talk about your individual self. Sometimes, when we ask a question, we'll say, well, I'm asking for a friend. So say, hey, I'm asking for a friend, or read an article, or just find some way to meet them where they're at and get it on a positive note. Because when it's something negative, nobody wants to talk about it. And I hate that there seems to be a negative stigma a lot of times when you're talking about money. It doesn't have to be negative. Even if you're starting to save, $5 a week, that's a win. I opened up a bank account today with my name and I set up direct deposit where $20 out of my paycheck is going in there. Or I set up a 529 plan. With Ohio, you can get a $4,000 deduction on your taxes when you contribute. So after this, so little things like that are positive. Let's make talking about money a good thing, something that uplifts us. Even the smallest things can be a win. So I think if we started like that, you've already shifted a negative conversation into something more positive.
I agree. And I think talking about ways in which we can use our money to make more money is one of the most exciting things. That's why Acorns was really big for your daughter. People struggle, especially I think young people don't want to be the first one to bring it up in a friend group or with colleagues at work or something like that, because it's something that a lot of people are taught by their parents. This is something that I was taught by my parents, is that if you do talk about money with your family, which a lot of families don't talk about with each other, you don't share that information with anyone else. It's private, it's personal. But if, say, you have colleagues at work and you're all in the same 401k plan, talking about the quote unquote free money, the 401k match that your employer is giving you as part of your compensation. It's not just, free money that's there to take it or leave it, but it's part of your salary. Your overall compensation is to get that money. And just saying, hey, did you know that they'll give you 3% or 5% or 10%? And that could mean so many thousands of dollars. And all you have to do is just have a little bit deducted from your paycheck. That's something positive. That's something exciting. And you can get that ball rolling with having that conversation, and people will feel more comfortable. I've had that experience in my early professional life where people started saying, well, okay, you told me about the 401k. Did you read about the HSA? Because I don't know what to do about my health insurance now that I'm turning 26. And you can start making people feel a bit more comfortable by showing that you're comfortable, and you don't have to have all the answers, but sharing that excitement's really important.
Exactly. Sharing the excitement, and you don't have to have all the answers. I mean, a lot of times when I learn something new, or when my daughter learns something new, we're like, oh, let me show you what I learned today. Like, she is the graphics design queen. So she teaches me stuff every day. And when she learns something, the next thing she wants to do is say, oh, let me show it to you. So the example with the 401k at work, I think the message might be even more powerful if it's coming from another young person. It's like, how many 50, 60-year olds are telling you, oh, yeah, take that match. It might not mean quite as much from them as it would maybe someone that is your age. So if you've got a coworker or someone that is coming in and they started the same year you did at the job, or they're a recent graduate just like you, say, yeah, I learned how to choose my funds in my 401k. And they'll be like, really? I just took what's there. And so if you took it one step further and said, oh, yeah, let me show you. That's a powerful word. Oh, yeah, let me show you. I learned this today. Something that simple.
I think that's a great idea, and we could all use a little more openness about sharing the things that we learned, even though it makes us a little more vulnerable about sharing the things that we don't know yet. But that gives us a community to work towards those things with. I think that's what's so beautiful about the personal finance community, the group of people who are interested in personal finance and educating publicly online. But even within our own social groups, I mean, saying, hey, you asked me a question I don't know about, that means we both have an opportunity to learn. I'll go look it up, and let's go both do some research and talk about it, because we could both benefit from this conversation.
Yeah. And for me, I've kind of gotten that label as the personal finance girl or the money guru at work. So everybody comes to me, be like, do you have 5 minutes where, they really want an hour, but do you have 5 minutes where you could show me my 401k? And I've seen some horrendous things. Like, I had a good friend and she was quite a bit younger than me. So she was like maybe 34 or something. And she wanted me to look at her 401k. So I looked at her 401k with her. And while we were in there, I can't remember what she was looking at, but she wasn't looking at the funds. So while we were in there, I said, let's take a look at your funds, so that you will know what you're invested in. And I can tell you how to tell that. So we go and look at it. Now she's 34. We go in there and look at it. And at least 90% of her allocation was a money market fund, and she had no idea. And, I didn't, freak out. I just said, well, I said, now we can change that. I said, here's what a money market fund. So I was explaining to her, it was just like a savings account. And I said, when do you plan to retire? And she's like, oh my God, not until like 60 or 65. I said, so you have a really long time. I said, typically, if you have a really long time, you can take a little bit more risk than a money market. So for instance, the S&P 500 was up 31% last year. So if you want 31% versus the 2% that you got, why don't we, you might want to change that, or look at some of these other options. Here's all your options, and here's how to tell how they perform. Here's how to get the fun fact sheet. I'm more of an educator, so I don't want to sit there and just give advice. And I love to teach a person to fish versus just giving them a fish. So yeah, I mean, those are such good points. Make it something positive and share what you learn. And as you start to do that, especially if you're in the personal finance community or you just have a special interest in it, people will start to see that, and they will come to you and they will ask you things that they might not be comfortable asking someone else. And you don't have to know it all. And my friends, they all know that if it's something they don't know, And even if it's about finances, even if they think I might not know and I'll say I don't know, they will ask me because they know I'm so curious about personal finance. Well, I will go dig for the answer. Like, so 3 weeks later, I'll be like, oh, remember that question you asked me about health savings account? Here's the answer, you know?
Yeah, I love that. So we hear a lot of stories in the financial independence and retire early or the FIRE community from people who look a little bit like the white male who's an engineer is making over six figures a year. Now, you have met financial independence and retired early, but your story looks different. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, it is quite different, which is the primary reason that I do like to share my story. And I know that it's hugely important that I do because all the people that I know that have retired early, many times a lot younger than me in their 30s and 40s, sometimes even in their 20s, they are, like you said, white male six figures, there's a few Asians, but really no black people that I know of that are openly talking about having retired early. There's plenty that are great content creators that are on the path and supporting the whole black community in spreading the message of financial independence and retiring early. So I think some of the big differences that I've seen, and I guess I had to be smart enough to realize, okay, their story and their journey, this is what's different and this is what is the same. And there was a lot of things that were different that I had to make sure I adjusted for. So some of those things were I grew up in real poverty and I didn't have anyone helping me through school. And when it comes to that, it's not even just financial, right? It's about, I didn't have anyone saying, okay, here's how important your test scores are to make sure you get into a good school and you get scholarships. I know, certain people at different companies and I can kind of help you get in or help you get an interview. Here's the classes you need to take so that you can maybe not have to take those classes in college, and thereby saving money. I didn't have anyone holding my hand or guiding me because I was first generation college graduate. Nobody in my family. I have five siblings. It was six of us, and none of them went to college or finished college. I'm the first one. So I'm having to lead that charge. A lot of the white males, multiple generations of college educated people that can give them a step by step playbook for what to do, how to succeed. I barely even knew how the GPA formula worked. There was just so much I didn't know, and I had to guess and figure it out myself, and everyone around me was also in poverty. So I didn't have anyone saying, oh, wow, you're graduating school. Here's 5 grand to kind of get you started on your way, a down payment for your condo or your apartment. I didn't have any of those little advantages. And certainly I've heard many talk about, yeah, if things don't work out, I can go live with my parents for a while. Or I decided after college, I could go back and live with my parents and I could just save every penny that I earn as an engineer, making $120,000 a year. I didn't have that option. There was no home to go back to. There was no safety net for me. So everything that I do, I had to measure twice and cut once because there was no soft landing to go to. I had to do it all on my own and I didn't have all these support systems. And it is what it is. I don't necessarily, complain about it, but that journey for me looked so different. And, when I hear people say, oh, yeah, I grew up in middle class. Well, boy, I dreamed about being in the middle class growing up. I went back to live with my parents. Like, oh, really? Man, if I had the chance to go live somewhere for free while I stockpiled everything, I would love to do that. So there's a lot of things that look different, but I was very determined where I wasn't going to let that keep me from it. But it's not like that for everyone. And I realize, as I've done a lot of financial literacy classes, personal finance workshops, and things like that, so many people have had it worse than me, and so many people have had it better than me. But the common theme is that when I'm in underserved populations, people of color, people that have been in situations like I've done sessions at a women's shelter. I've done sessions at this wonderful program that's for single moms pursuing a degree. They're struggling And it's a complete win for them to just finish college and not flunk out and not drop out. So my early days, there was just so many challenges that made it extremely hard to get my footing. And the idea of doing it in, when I was 20 or 30, or even in my 40s, it was just an impossibility. And luckily, I did have this side of my brain that had this insane curiosity about personal finance. And I think that was one of the biggest drivers to me still wanting to turn it around regardless of all the roadblocks and all the things that I had to deal with, all the adversities. And I often think about this analogy. So if you've got, someone that has had a straight path, they had a pretty good childhood, they were middle class, the parents helped them get through school. A lot of middle class families, they believe that it's their job to pay for the kids' college. So they have that advantage, and all these different little advantages that they had, they add up. And if that's what they've had all their lives, they probably don't even realize that, wow, there's so many people that could only dream of having that. So I use this analogy where, let's say you're running a 2-mile race. Okay. So you've got me over here, and you've got the middle class person that grew up in a middle class family over here. And we're both running towards fire, right? This 2-mile race. Okay. It's like me having like 8 hurdles to jump over in my lane, and this other person not having any hurdles. So even if I were exceptional and above and stronger and all these other qualities, even if I was better than this other person, it's not going to matter. If I have to jump over 8 hurdles to finish my race, and you can just go straight and have no hurdles, or maybe one, there's no competition. I'm going to slow down. I mean, I still made it to the finish line in my mind, but as fast or as strong and as high as I could jump, there's no way I could beat this person or even compete with this person that has a straight line.
Thank you for sharing that. And this is a podcast where I share the stories of women, and something else that women face that men don't face is the wage gap. And that actually will even vary among the ethnicity of the woman. Compared to a white male, Latina women make 54 cents for every dollar, and black women are paid 62 cents for every dollar, and white women are paid 79 cents to every dollar. There's so many things that affect everyone's path, and so I think it helps for us to be conscious of our privilege. Many people who are educating themselves about personal finances have gotten to a point where a lot of other people haven't. So I think it's a really good thing to work towards sharing that knowledge, towards lifting up other people, other women, other people of color, and making sure that we're all working towards this together, and that we're also sharing stories of people who don't look like us, and sharing stories that are not the norm, that are not that typical white male engineer who's making 6 figures, because I want everyone who listens to this to see something in one of these interviews and say, I can do that too.
I think that's great, Becky. And I really applaud your platform, and I applaud your position on this because, as an African American woman, I've had to deal with this my whole life, and I've talked about it my whole life, but I kind of feel like in the past it's just been stifled. And, I might get things like, mental roll of the eyes. Oh, is she talking about race again? So to have other white people or people of other races to stand up and say, that's not right. I'm not black, but I know right from wrong. And I know when there's been injustices or when there's disparities, and I want to stand up for it. So to me, that speaks volumes, and that helps. It absolutely helps.
And I think we all need to help each other. I think that's what it's all about. And you're a personal finance educator, and that's what's great about personal finances is that we can help other people help themselves and figure out what they can do to create a better future for themselves and to create generational wealth and to help their children avoid the mistakes that they made. I think everyone could point back to a financial mistake that they've made that they say, if I could go back and change it, if I could tell someone else who is in my position, like, hey, maybe I would do this differently, we can all learn from each other. And that's really what I'm trying to do here.
Absolutely. And, my big mission. So, as you talk about FIRE, financial independence, retiring early, to me, the biggest part is your why of FI, right? And for me, sure, I want to travel a little bit more. I just want to have, more of my time to do with what I want. But my big dream is to create a financially literate society. Like that is what I want to see. And I just got to think bigger than myself. It's great that I, made it to where I retired in my 40s. I did great financially. I passed it on to my daughter, but I think so much about the people I left behind. Like the communities that I grew up in, it's still full of poverty. It's still full of underserved populations. And I could not imagine continuing on and not pausing and looking back and trying to bring along as many people as I can. So I'm hoping that with my message and continuing to better myself, because I'm a lifelong learner. So I'm continuing to learn as much as I can because I want to pass it on to not just my community, but everyone that may have struggled like me, that didn't have all the advantages, to say, it is possible to get on this path. And the most encouraging part, Becky, is that when you are starting from nothing, when you're starting in poverty, behind the finish line, you have so much room to move. So even if you just move to where you're in the middle class and you're no longer living paycheck to paycheck, that's a win. Even if it means that you don't have any more debt, that's a win. So you might not even want to retire early, but there's so much movement that you can get by doing a few things right with your personal finances. But so many people that I know and so many of these communities have never heard this message. And sure, we're in the world of the internet and Google and all of that, but you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what to search for. You don't know certain things even exist for you to dig more into it. So if I have to be that igniter or that person to introduce them to, hey, it is possible to improve your finances, then maybe we can lift up an entire generation. So that's kind of my mission, but I'm glad that we're both trying to do our part in making this personal finance thing available to everyone.
And I think a huge part of that is you sharing your story. And so I'd love to talk about what financial independence looked like for you when you started pursuing it, when you reached financial independence, and when you retired early. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so that's totally the fun part. So thank you. So for me, I think it did start right around the time I got divorced, about 2 years. I spent plenty of time trying to heal myself emotionally and trying to get on the right path. And one of the first things that I did, the first actionable things, was that I joined an investment club, and it's supported by a nonprofit organization called betterinvesting.org. And basically, they have meetings where the model club is the meetings are open to the public. So I would come and visit, and I think I visited 4 or 5 times, and I was glad that they were a nonprofit organization, and I was glad that the meetings were open to the public, so I didn't even have to join. I could just observe, and that they were mostly about education of individual investors. So that helped me because I was around like-minded people, and that's community. And community has played a huge part in my life, being a part of communities of like-minded people. So when I did that, more than anything, that helped me be more comfortable with the stock market and to understand the stock market and investing and compound growth. So I was very comfortable with going ahead and maxing out my 401k. I think before I almost saw my 401k as something that was just over there, and I didn't pay much attention to it. But I knew that if I would max it out, then that compound growth is going to take effect. I was able to look at the funds in there, and I just got like a total stock market index fund or the closest thing I could find to that. When health savings account became available, this is a really good example. I didn't know anything about health savings accounts, hardly nobody did. And the company didn't necessarily give us a lot of education around that either. So I had to do a lot of digging myself. So I figured out exactly how a health savings account works, and it worked for me and my family. You have to have a high deductible plan, but I did, and that plan worked great. And I definitely love the HSA part of that. So I started maxing that out every year and I started investing in that. I was maxing out my Roth IRA. Again, all these things are thinking like an investor and what this is going to look like 10 years from now. And most of this happened around 2008 or 2009. So the whole example of compound growth, you could not find a better time in history to look at compound growth. So not only was I doing the right thing and I knew how investment works and I had the confidence to do it, having the wind at my back to with these investments made a huge difference. So I definitely give credit to the strong stock market performance for the 10 years that I was looking at FIRE. The early days when I was approaching this, let's say 9, 10 years ago, I don't think the acronym even existed, FIRE, but I was comfortable. And that's why the investment club was important because the FIRE community didn't even exist. So when I started hearing people talk about financial independence, I started taking notice. I'm like, oh, I think that's what I'm doing. And my preferred medium, guess what, is podcasts. I love listening. And so I would go into the Apple podcast and do a search on personal finance. And then that changed to financial independence. And then that changed to FIRE, retire early. So I loved seeing all these new people come out. Now, like you mentioned, the avatar for the FIRE community was like white male engineers. That's kind of who started, but I was learning a lot from them. But again, I had to make adjustments because I was making less than six figures and I never made more than six figures the whole time. So as they're talking about how much they made, they were never clear about it. I would kind of guess it was around six figures. I mean, I think a couple times I looked it up to see what an engineer made, well over six figures, not what I was making, but I was taking away as much as I could of what did apply to me. One of the most powerful things I did is I started my net worth statement in a spreadsheet. So personal capital wasn't around. All these other tools weren't around, which is totally okay because I kind of like, I'm a spreadsheet nerd, just like most of the FIRE community. But I started it out very simple. And over the years, I've added this and that. I'm like, I want to see this. I want to see that. So it's a pretty big spreadsheet right now with like 20 different tabs at the bottom. Doing my net worth statement was an extremely powerful exercise. So if somebody is looking to kind of get started, I would start with like doing a net worth statement. That's your assets, like your 401k, your IRA, anything that you own. And then you subtract what you owe, your student loans, if you owe on a car, things like that. So you may be in the red the first time that you do this, but even if you are, it feels so good to see the needle moving. So I would go into my spreadsheet. I would say about 6 or 7 years ago, I started updating it monthly. I remember early on I wasn't, but I update it monthly. And there's like 5 or 6 primary accounts anyway. It's not a ton. So it doesn't take me that much time, but I, who doesn't like to see their money growing? So I love it. Now back in February and March, not so much because it was going down, but doing the net worth statement, it let me know where I was at. So then I had the big question of, okay, so how do I know when I can retire early? So for me, probably like everyone else, they are fed the idea that retiring early is 62 if you listen to the Social Security Administration, right? 55 is the number that's used by a lot of people. That's retiring early. So finally, I started looking and based on, this FI number, which that's 25 times your expenses, I got there and I knew I would get there in my mid 40s. And I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. And of course, I had all the other excuses that most of us use when we're hesitating about retiring. That's the health insurance, what am I going to do? And things like that. Those were important questions because the wheel started turning and I start imagining what would life look like if I didn't have to work every day at a job and I created my own paycheck from my investments, the investments that I knew had grown because I started investing 10 years ago. Knowing that I could do that and this 25 times your expenses, I reached that number. I reached that number at, I think I was 46. I just wasn't ready yet. The way that I was brought up and everything that was around me was that you work a job and you retire at 65, all of these misnomers. And I just said, I think I could do it early, but I'm not quite ready to do it at 46, even though I had 25 times my expenses. I waited 2 more years. And I didn't just wait. This was time that I used to reimagine my life after I retired, to decide what I wanted to do. It's like that is a question that most people never get a chance to ask themselves. If I could structure my day and my life exactly like I wanted to, without regard to a paycheck, wow, that's a big question. So for me, I decided to go back to school, which that was kind of embarrassing because my GPA was so low. And when I applied to this master's program, of course, the first thing they wanted to do was, what was your GPA in undergrad? Even though that was 20 years ago, I had to revisit that whole thing. But I did, and I had decided, if I don't get in. If I decide not to go, I want it to be because they rejected me and didn't want me in versus me not applying. So that was a part of it, but also I knew that it had to focus on financial literacy, financial education. I am this messenger. I'm the one that represents this piece of the world that I know I can have an impact on. So knowing that my time would be freed up to go after this big dream and to impact as many people as I could, that was kind of fuel for me. So after 2 years of working out my plan, I finally turned in my fire letter and I finally retired. I don't call it resign. I retired. My boss was amazing. I'm only grateful for the company that I worked for. I had a great boss. I had great teammates. And so I wasn't running away from a job at all. So I had this big fire party. I had like an open house at work. And I had all these different parties where everybody wanted to celebrate even more than me. They're like, oh, we got to get together. We got to do something. We got to do something. So it was pretty amazing. And all the while, I guess the most thrilling part was that my daughter was watching all of this the whole time. That was what really was the icing on the cake.
That's an amazing story. So just like a quick recap, you started working towards financial independence without necessarily having this fire term for it, right? Around the age of 36 to 38. And then when you were 46, you hit your fire number, the amount of money that you needed to retire early. And that was 25 times your annual expenses. And then you stayed in your job for another couple of years until you were 49 and you had 30 times your expenses to give yourself that little buffer. But also, I think that the message of making a plan and figuring out what life after retirement looks like is so important, because it's good to hear that you weren't running away from your job but not knowing what you're running towards. But that's the case for so many people. I mean, the dream of early retirement, I think, is closely tied for a lot of people to the idea of escaping the cubicle and not having to do the work that they have dedicated a lot of their time to but might not necessarily enjoy. So you've crafted this life after retirement, and I'd love for you to tell me about that a little bit more. I know you're doing your master's and you're working on your mission. What does retirement look like? We didn't even talk about when you retired. When did you retire?
Okay, my exact retirement date is December 6th, 2019. So I'm like fresh off the boat here, out of this job. I'm into my whole retirement life. So I guess we're talking in June. So it's been about 6 months. Like I said, most of my time is with my master's program because I'm kind of trying to recapture my academic abilities because I knew, I was pretty smart in high school. I made A's and B's, and I was just thoroughly disappointed with myself when I was in undergrad. And I knew I didn't do as well as I was capable of. And it was because I was working so much and I really didn't have the time, the focus. I wanted to reclaim that. And so I don't just want to get my master's degree. I want to graduate with a 4.0. And I did get done with the first semester, two classes, 4.0. And you know what? It's this miracle of doing what I want to with my time. So I'm able to enjoy the learning, enjoy the academic process. And, a lot of people who ask me, they're like, oh, well, why did you retire and now you are going to school? Most people go to school to get a job. I'm like, well, I'm definitely not going to school to work for corporate America afterwards. Okay. I'm just building up my own knowledge base of a field that I will be dedicating my life to. And I'm serving a dual purpose. So I've been doing the financial education and financial literacy classes and workshops for at least 6 years. So I'm continuing to do that, except I have a lot more flexibility and I can do more. Like when I was working full time, I could only do so many things. And I just always felt like I was so busy and I didn't have hardly any free time. Now that I have more time available, especially with the coronavirus and a lot of things done through Zoom, I don't even have to worry about the travel part. So I've done many classes like I've done for Better Investing. I'm still a part of them. I'm actually on their board now. Yay. And I do a lot of teaching through Better Investing, and I like to focus on individuals that may not have been exposed to investing at all. So we participate in something called Money Smart Week, where you're just focusing on these basic financial education topics and it's open to the public. So I did a presentation on, I titled it, What Are These Mutual Funds in My Investment Account? So if you have a 401k or a Roth IRA or any retirement accounts, you hear this term mutual fund. Most people don't even know what that is. So I just pull back the curtain and I show them every little piece that they would want to know about that. So that's an organization that I do things with. I've worked with so many organizations over the years. Here where I live, there is a group called the Black Women's Think Tank that was inside one of the Sinclair Community College that's here that I worked with for at least a couple of years. I've done sessions just for the community college, a group called the African American Male Initiative, a group that has a program for single moms that are pursuing a college degree. So I've had the honor to be connected to all of these wonderful organizations and this audience that I may be the first time they've heard some of this stuff. So I get to do that and I enjoy it's almost like, opening up a Christmas present every time I do this group because the questions that I get, I always get new questions and I started doing something. I will give away $2 bills for good questions or good answers because again, I'm trying to get them engaged and I tell them what the $2 bills mean to me. I started collecting them when I was a kid, even when I was that poor growing up, poor college kid. I held on to these $2 bills because I thought they were special. And so as I became an adult, I still saved these $2 bills all the time, every week at least. And as I started making more, I could save more of them. Well, when I finally started counting them, I had like $3,600 worth. And I knew that I couldn't just go spend them somewhere or turn them into the bank. So I decided as I'm doing these financial literacy sessions, especially with young people, I will give away these $2 bills because it just shows how much even just the smallest amount adds up. Now, most of them will go, spend the $2 bill on whatever, but I want them to know the story behind it. And I want them to find their $2 bill, what sparks them to save and to know that in the long run, you just need to start no matter how small. So everything that I'm doing after I retired is going to be in the area of financial education, financial literacy. And if it's something other than that, I'm probably not going to do it.
But I love that your retirement is about a mission and you're driven to give back. And I think I identify as a lifelong learner as well. It's one of my core values is to continue learning every day because that is something that I just value so much. I love to learn. I'm so interested in it and on a variety of topics, but right now in particular personal finance is huge for me, and it made me realize as I progressed through my FIRE journey that I don't want to retire to a life without work. I want to retire from work that is for someone else, for a corporation or a company, and do work that's mission driven from my heart. And that gives back to something larger than just me or my bank account.
Yeah, we need more people like that.
And I think a lot of people realize, and following kind of the early retirees who've documented their journeys, they realize that life isn't after retirement typically about laying on the beach and drinking a cocktail and relaxing and no longer contributing in a meaningful way to society, which is what a ton of people ask me that, oh, you're going to retire early? Why would you stop contributing in a meaningful way to society? And I'm like, that's where my contribution is going to start. My true contribution is going to be when I have the freedom of time to give back in ways that I find meaningful, regardless of whether or not I'm being paid for them.
Yeah, isn't that interesting that most people will connect your job to giving back in a productive way? That is not the only way that you can give back. So normally when I talk about retiring, I say I retired from corporate America and I don't no longer have to depend on a paycheck. I live off my investment so I can have the freedom to give back to society in a way that I value, where I believe I have a special skill or special interest that I need to be sharing with the world. What do I want my legacy to be? So that, I'm totally in line with you that, it started when I retired, my true mission of what I want to do.
I love that message. And I think that is a great ending point for our interview. But I do have a couple rapid fire questions.
Let's go.
All right. What does freedom mean to you?
Gosh, freedom means to me that there are no longer obstacles keeping me from doing what I want to do. I can choose to set up my day the way that I want. I can choose to set up my missions the way that I want. That would be my definition of freedom.
And what would you do if you could never retire?
Ooh, if I could never retire, well, I guess I could take that two ways. So, one, I don't think I will ever retire from what I'm doing now. But if you're talking about just like a regular job, oh my goodness, I'd probably not be very happy if I could never retire. But I do consider myself doing my life's work as sort of my job or my mission. And I will do that till the day I die. Like, my daughter, we've joked about this, but I would be, let's say if I'm 95 years old and I'm barely responsive, I'm, my last leg, and to get me sort of, to get my attention or to sort of spark some energy from me, she would say something like, "Oh, mom, look, I'm turning on CNBC so you can watch the stock market." And I could see me turning around and saying, "Okay, I'm up now."
But I think that you are doing what you would do if you couldn't retire. It sounds like your personal finance education work is totally something that you could and want to do for the rest of your life. And normally I ask people what they would do if they could retire right now, but you're doing it. And my last question is, if you could go back in time and give one piece of financial or lifestyle advice to yourself in your early 20s, what would you say?
So even though I'm all about personal finance, my answer is not going to be a personal finance answer. I think it's have empathy for others and think about how you can help make the world a better place in your little sphere of control. We all, don't have the voice of a president or a politician, but we all have control over something in our lives where we can have impact. And for my daughter, even though she learned a lot of the personal finance things that I taught her growing up, the thing I'm most proud of that she learned is the empathy that she has for others.
Thank you, Jackie. Where can everyone go online to learn more about you and your story?
Okay, they can visit my website, which is moneyletters2.com, and that's the number two. Also, I just did a talk at a wonderful conference that was put on by a woman, Diana Merriman, called Economy, and it has roots in the FIRE movement. And this was completely her brainchild, and she was pretty much a one woman show putting this together. And it was put together flawlessly. She had, professional videographers, stage manager, everything. And she had nine amazing speakers. And I did a talk about my real numbers behind firing. The title of the talk is Unveiling My Real Numbers Behind Firing. And you can see that if you go to YouTube, just put in economy, and that's spelled, it has an M-E at the end. It's sort of a play on words. But all of those videos are amazing. But I do actually step through my actual numbers. I talk about my salary, I talk about my net worth. And again, part of this mission is to remove the taboo of talking about money. So I figured what better way to kick this off than in front of a large audience on a large stage and just talking about my paycheck and all my finances.
Thank you, Jackie. I'll put a link to your book, website, and the video of your economy talk in the show notes at 20free.co/episode 24. This was an informative episode where Jackie was really open with sharing her story and the adversities that she faced as a Black single mom on the path to financial independence. I am so grateful to her for candidly sharing how her journey looked different than the typical fire story we hear about. As you may have heard me say before, I think it is important for me to use my platform to share diverse voices and to be an ally. Right now, in particular, a spotlight is on racial injustice against the Black community in the United States. We're going to get to the power moves in just a minute. But first, I want to talk about 5 things we can each do today to be better allies to the Black community. 1. Commit to educating yourself about race, racial injustice, and allyship. Please understand that it is your responsibility to educate yourself, not the responsibility of Black people to educate you. 2. Listen to the perspectives of Black people on all topics, not just race. Do so by following more Black people on social media and subscribing to more podcasts by Black creators. As a starting point for podcasts, I suggest Journey to Launch with Jamila Souffrant, Michelle is Money Hungry with Michelle Jackson, and The Thought Card with Danielle Desir. 3. Elevate the voices of Black people by sharing their ideas, writing, and work. This means using your platforms, including social media, speaking, podcasting, writing, research, etc., to share this content with your followers and your network. 4. Buy a book about how to talk about race, read it, and implement what you learn. When you're done reading it, give it to a friend or family member to read and discuss it with them. 5. Financially support a cause related to social justice, donate to campaigns, and buy from Black business owners. I have a list of resources, including articles and books to read, podcasts to listen to, videos to watch, people to connect with and follow, and places to donate at 20free.co/BLM. I encourage you to pause the podcast right now and take 10 minutes or less to do the following actions. Write down your commitment to educating yourself about racial injustice. Subscribe to 3 podcasts hosted by Black creators. Follow 3 Black influencers on your favorite social media platform. Order 1 book on Amazon. And donate $10 to a cause related to social justice. I've tried to make this as easy as possible by linking to resources at 20free.co/BLM. Remember, you can't stop there, but it's a start. When you're done, tune back in for power moves from today's episode. I want this to be more than just a podcast for listening to, so I'm making it a do-cast, where you're getting information from the podcast that you can take action on to create real outcomes in your life. I call these power moves. If you implement even one of these tactics into your life, you're taking a powerful step towards finding your freedom. What are some power moves we learned from this conversation? Here are 5. Power move number 1. Talk about money positively. The best way to break through the taboo of talking about money is to talk about it in a positive way. People aren't too open to discuss the negative aspects, like debt, but it can be easier to get someone excited about something positive, like watching investments grow. Jackie connected with her daughter using the Acorns app because her daughter was getting excited seeing her balance increase and discussing investing options with her. By focusing on even small wins like saving a little money, setting up a 529 plan, or opening a bank account, we can make money exciting and uplifting. This will help remove the negative stigma around talking about money. Power move number 2. Learn about money together. You've heard the saying about teaching someone to fish instead of giving them the fish. It's the same way with finances. If you know how to do something, walk someone else through it, explaining what the different parts mean, and allowing them to do their own exploration with you as a guide. This could be walking a coworker through how to understand the different options in the 401k, instead of just advising them to buy 1 or 2 specific funds. If someone asks you a question about money and you don't know the answer, you can say, "Let's go learn about this together," and enjoy the learning moment for both of you. When talking about money, it's important to not just give advice, but to also teach the why behind financial concepts and learning things together. Power move number 3, find your why for FI. Reaching financial independence gives you complete freedom to pursue anything you want, but that abundance of options can be really overwhelming. It's important to find your why for FI so that you can know what your goal is for achieving FI beyond not having to work. Think bigger than yourself when you're coming up with your why. Jackie's why for FI is to create a financially literate society. She wants to impact the impoverished and underserved population in the community she left behind using financial education. Jackie spent the last 2 years of work, after she was FI but before she was retired, figuring out her purpose. If you figure your why out now, it will become a great motivator on your path to FI. Power move number 4, know your net worth. Your net worth is an important metric to track during your path to financial independence. You can calculate your net worth by adding up everything you own, such as a 401k, IRA, and savings account, and subtracting everything you owe, such as student loans, car loans, and mortgages. The basic formula is assets minus liabilities. Your net worth gives you an overview of your financial health. Tracking your net worth is so encouraging during your journey to financial independence because you can increase it in 2 ways: by decreasing liabilities by paying off debts, and by increasing assets by saving and investing. Seeing your net worth chart move upwards can be a fantastic motivator to continue on your journey. An easy way to track your net worth is using Personal Capital. You can find a link to Personal Capital in the show notes at 20free.co/episode 24. Power move number 5, think about your legacy. The pursuit of financial independence can easily become self-focused, but you can find a lot of meaning in thinking about what you want your legacy to be, whether that is generational wealth and financial education for your family, creating a financially literate world, preserving art, or saving the planet. You get to choose what you want your legacy to be. Again, having a goal of creating a legacy that is larger than yourself will be hugely motivating during your journey and will enable your financial independence to positively affect many other lives. That is the 5th and final power move from my conversation with Jackie Cummings Koski about retiring in her 40s. Do you want to finally feel good about your finances and have a stress-free plan to create a life you love? It's time for you to reach your biggest money goals, like paying off debt, building up savings, and using your money to create your ideal life. As a money coach, I will help you gain clarity about what freedom looks like for you, develop a strategy to get there, and overcome your money roadblocks on the path to financial and lifestyle freedom. Let's hop on the phone. During our free 15-minute coaching call, we're going to develop a vision for your ideal life and how your finances fit in. Not only are you going to get massive clarity, you're also going to get a free spending plan spreadsheet just for booking the call. Visit 20free.co/moneycoaching to get your free money coaching call and budget spreadsheet right now. That's the word 20, free.co/moneycoaching. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you're subscribed to the Find Your Freedom podcast on whatever app you're using to listen to this episode. Do me a favor and also leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Go to 20free.co/iTunes to be redirected to the page on Apple Podcasts where you can leave your rating and review. I really appreciate it. If you think this episode would help someone you know, please share it with a friend. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Find Your Freedom podcast. My name is Becky. You can connect with me on Instagram and Twitter at 20freeco and sign up for free resources and email updates at www.20free.co. That's the word 20, free.co. I'll talk to you next week on another episode of the Find Your Freedom podcast.